So we are live here. This is Addy Ads, Anakin Skywalker, YouTube's chosen one. And this man may need no introduction. He certainly does in many circles on the alternative media and YouTube. George Webb, reporter and YouTuber. George, how are you doing?
Great, Andy. I love your shows with Paul Cottrell, PhD, and Kevin McCairn, and the doctor roundtables you do. They're 4 hours long, and I watch them beginning to end because they're so good. And I just think that people need to discover your great content. I know how hard that is to put 5 people together too.
Wow, I appreciate that, George. I didn't know that you watched them. Yeah, that's quite the compliment. I'm actually trying to make them shorter, to be honest with you, just to get them a little more condensed and bang for your buck. But yeah, thanks for tuning in, man. I actually have been watching your old videos because I feel like that's a good tactic to see where YouTubers are coming from. And you actually blew my mind with your disposition matrix video and a couple of your videos actually, with just how kind of relevant that information is, and the fact that nobody really knows about it.
Yeah, a lot of these technologies that we're just seeing happen right now happened on the battlefield. I call it like moving from the battlefield to the soccer field or the baseball field. They were perfected for tracking terrorists, and through people like a guy named Imran Awan, this kind of Pakistani spy ring that we had. They were for tracking terrorists, and now they're being brought here. The nano satellites, everything, the chips, the dust, the smart dust, all that stuff.
Let's move back a bit because I just want to go to your origins, George. But firstly, where are you broadcasting from right now?
I call this the diplomatic back channel. This is the Potomac River right behind me. And we're a little south of Washington. We're in the middle of 3 naval research and development warfare centers. So to that direction is Pax River, which is Nav Air. And to that, right across, you may even hear the guns go off today, is Nav Sea, which is Dahlgren. And then that way is Indian Head. So all the people that live around here, this is kind of where they have their vacation homes. It makes for great interviews because you don't have to drive to Washington. You can interview all the guys that I report on right here, which is kind of cool, and women.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Fantastic. Yeah. But as far as I could tell, the reason you created your YouTube channel initially, or the catalyst, seemed to be the Portland bomb incident. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, George. Can you just explain that to people? Because I want to know more about your role in particular.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't like involved in the bombing.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me rephrase that. So if people want to read about the bombing, they can go on Wikipedia and read about it. But you were critical of the federal response to it, as far as I understand.
Well, also the federal lead up to it. This is a 17-year-old Somali kid. He was a straight A student. I knew his parents. I wasn't friends with them, but good kid, good dad, working hard, Muslim family, come over from the war, that kind of story. He was going to Oregon State. They had 3 different informants work on him. One of them was a beautiful young lady. I believe she was from Saudi Arabia or wherever, but they shipped her in. One of them was his roommate. And they worked on him for 1.5 years to get him to press a cell phone, to take a cell phone. They're showing him all these pictures of atrocities and so forth over a long period of time, trying to radicalize him. And then finally, at the Portland Christmas tree lighting, which happens every year at Thanksgiving, they had him press a cell phone that he thought was going to ignite a truck or a van that had gasoline and so forth in it. And he got 30 years for that. And I just thought, this seems so contrived. It sounds like make crime. You've cultivated, like in a school, this kid. You've taken a pretty, cool kid who was having good grades, and you made him into what you think is a terrorist so that you can push your agenda. At that time, this Joint Terrorism Task Force, which again, take a military police type situation and bring it to America. That's what this JTTF was. And Portland was the last major city that was resisting JTTF because they didn't want a silent, black hand on the police department. And so I was organizing Twitter storms. Twitter had just come out, in 2011, and you know, somebody was making their career, and this was the group that Andy McCabe was a part of when he made his bones, and Peter Struck again, Pyenka, all the same people that end up going and doing the Trump thing.
Yeah, it seems like this entrapment is something people are becoming more aware about. I cannot speak on this incident because I haven't researched it thoroughly like George has, but just speaking on something that happened in my home state of Wisconsin with Brendan Dassey and Stephen Avery, that is quite a famous case now because of the Netflix show Making a Murderer. But it's just relates to that entrapment thing and people becoming more aware of it. But as far as your response and critique of the feds back then in that incident, you were doing that mainly via Twitter, it sounds like then.
Yeah, Twitter. I had a blog. I called it No More Informants because they weren't really informants. They were crime coaches. And like I say, when you start living, you know, having a roommate in college with the guy and you start showing these, atrocity pictures to somebody every day, and then you have a girl who becomes his girlfriend, beautiful girl, and she's talking about atrocities that never occurred to her family.
She was in on it too?
Oh, yeah. The girlfriend was an informant as well. They used 3 different informants on him. And, you know, anybody, if you're, let's say you fell in love with somebody and now you got a relationship and they started telling you about their family back home, and these horrible Americans that murdered their whole family or droned their wedding or whatever, that's gonna radicalize anybody. And I just think if you can't do that within 2 weeks or a month, that should be it. You don't get that long to radicalize somebody. You don't get a year and a half, 2 years, and you shouldn't be going after minors either. And I would live very close to where the mosque was, and I know where they were recruiting, and it was very it just wasn't a good situation. And I think if people knew that's how it worked, they wouldn't be so gung-ho after 9/11.
Yeah. And could you explain, because you mentioned it really in passing, and perhaps I don't know your fan base that well yet, George, so perhaps your fan base is really well versed on that stuff, but what did you mean by Stasi? Because I think I know what you mean. You're referring to the German intelligence post or during the Cold War, right? And could you just go into that?
Yeah, sort of the Nazis, a lot of them went to the east with the Russians, and half of them went to the west. And they had all these super war technology secrets, and they went. You know, this guy named Reinhard Gehlen went one way, and this other guy went the other way. I think it's a guy named Muller, but anyway, Reinhard Muller or Heinrich Muller. But what they did was they took over the East German police, and Heinrich Muller basically had that side, I believe, and but someone in that old Nazi intelligence, and they basically put in the same system of what they call low intensity warfare, where it's just a whole team of people. I think at one point, 1 out of every 17 people in East Germany were informants. And you don't need a lot. I mean, if you have one person at the church, that's the priest of the church, you don't need like half the congregation. And they were just, they called it decomposition. I can't remember the German word anymore, but it's just this low, steady pressure on people that aren't on the winners list. And then they have they're on the losers list, but then they have their list of winners that they put in place. And gradually over time, their winners will rise to the top and the people they target will sink to the bottom.
And it's really just talking about the tactic here or the strategy. It's really velvet glove and really Sun Tzu-esque, really Asian military philosophy as opposed to Clausewitzian military philosophy, in that it's super distilled and really hands off, and it's to the point where people don't even know that it's going on from what I've read. But you have written about it and produced content as far as the disposition matrix, and there's a Wikipedia article on this. Could you just describe that as it relates to the Stasi?
Yeah, well, I think it was called Zersetzung, which I think in German means decomposition. So by the description, you can figure out you basically unwind and break the bonds that everyone has with their work. You know, you might have somebody at work write a letter saying this guy is a pedophile or whatever. This guy stole money or whatever, and it's anonymous. So, but from then on, the boss has got a question in his mind, and the same thing where they might introduce a love interest in order to break up your marriage. And you wouldn't believe people have time to sit down and do these kind of things. But if you remember those Peter Strzok uh, things, they were talking about lures, all these lures, they were bringing on all these girls. They actually do it. And if you hadn't seen it up close, you wouldn't believe it. And if these encroachments also have a surveillance piece to it, because the more they can see, the more they know how to just do the smallest little things that'll disrupt your life the most. And this tracking, this contact tracing and tracking, is the next level, where you have to give up all your friends, and then you have to make them get vaccinated.
So, as far as it goes back to the Portland incident, you said that you were on one of these lists, right?
I believe I was. The disposition matrix came from the Obama administration and really comes from James Clapper when he was at the National Geospatial Administration, before he ends up becoming kind of the head of the Office of Defense, the Department of National Intelligence, the ODNI. But it's the idea of geo-tracking, geo-tracking somebody from all the assets, from your phone, from any Wi-Fi that you might connect to, even from space, your car.
What made you believe, or what led you to believe that you were on this list or one of these lists?
Well, there's two lists. One is a no-fly list, which, if you remember, after 9/11 was only like 50,000 people. But then there was another list, sort of a silent list, which is kind of like more like 2 million people. And that's just basically people that were watching. We're watching you. And I FOIA'd my file from the FBI.
Freedom
and also,
of Information Act, FOIA.
Yeah, right. Freedom of Information Act. And you could go out to a site called Muckraker or Muckrock. It's Muckrock. And you can get yours. You could ask for your own, and you can just check the boxes and say, I want my file. Well, my FBI, a lot of them came back and said, I don't have a file. But Oregon State Police came back and said something, but it wasn't anything to do with traffic violations or anything. It was. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I asked for some JTTF records, and the Oregon State Police just sent me their annual budget, which was just basically the coffee expenses, because it's all off budget. But the FBI wouldn't give me my file. They used these codes. There's these two-digit codes where they won't give you the reason why you're an exception for us not having to respond to the FOIA. And that's when I knew I had a pretty good idea. At that point, I knew I was on the list, because if I wasn't on the list, I would have got the same answer that I got from the other 10 agencies or 11 that I asked, which was, no file. So,
Gotcha. Okay,
yeah.
so that's what led you to believe that. And I just wanted to, no, go ahead, George.
Well, I think the exception, if I remember, it was called 8F. And then I talked to a lot of other people that had said, they believed that they were under investigation and so forth. And they were also 8Fs. So I don't know if that's like the Group W bench, or you don't know what that is. But there was a song called Alice's Restaurant, where they took all the people who couldn't pass the Vietnam War draft, and they put them all over there on the Group W bench.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But that was before you were born, so we won't go there.
It was indeed, George. Just your thoughts, George, in general, on, because there are some people who don't know who you are, who are tuned in on this pandemic. How serious is this? It seems to me people, as they often do, are looking at it completely black or white. Either it's the end of the world or it's a complete hoax. And I think it's somewhere in the middle. But what do you think, George?
Well, I was told by somebody, again, I work a lot with people who breadcrumb me information. And again, this is classified information sometimes, and so they don't want to get in trouble. But they can kind of hint around that you're getting warm, and one of the folks who had an inn at Sandia National Laboratories told me that there was two strains. There was an L strain and an S strain. The S strain is the safe strain, which is meant to, in terms of a bioweapon, what you want when you go into a country and you want to take down the country is you want to have something that's relatively low infection or high infection rate, but it doesn't disable you. And this could be used to, for instance, for your tribe that you're supporting in a war. This could be used to vaccinate. So you want it to be very communicable. And, you know, I saw Dr. Cottrell with you and, you know, talking about 5 or 6 different receptors, 5 or 6 different pathways that this spike protein can attach to. You want to make it a lot of Velcro, you know, it's like one of those Velcro dart games. You know, you want a lot of Velcro on that molecule. Then for the lethal strain, that's for your enemies. That's for your enemies. And you don't want to expose them to the safe strain. You want to hit them with the lethal strain. And so I think those two things are going on right now. I don't know what's afoot, but if you think about, you know, my son's a doctor and we talk about this a lot, radiologist. And if you look at the presentation of the lungs, this ground glass presentation, this oxygen type deprivation, this oxidative stress, where it's like they're forcing in oxygen with these intubations and forcing with the tents, you know, the ventilators. But the heme, the actual softball mitt that's supposed to hold the O2 softball, can't catch. It's dropping the ball. It's like those kids that you throw the ball and it hits their glove and it just falls.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the problem. That's one of the problems. So you know, and again, any good bioweapon would attack both the red blood cells because you want your opponent to tire quickly. And then it would also attack the white blood cells because you don't want them to heal quickly. So, and this does that as well. It goes after the macrophages, which is a type of white blood cell, and it also goes after the T cells. These were the important leukocytes or white blood cells that were attacked in HIV. And it's got this glycoprotein 120, these 4 inserts that are CRISPRed into this new coronavirus. So it's everything you could want in a bioweapon. So
you don't see an end
me,
game at this point, George?
I think the end game is vaccinate for all. I really do think there is if you look at what Bill Gates says, I just wait for Bill Gates to talk. And, you know, it's either the quantum dot here in your crevice of your thumb or it's the chip. And then you hold it with the phone, whatever hand that is, you hold the phone, and there is enough signaling there, especially when you get to these new 5G phones, that it creates a signal. And he's even talking about it. It can verify your financial transactions, you know, so you don't have to put your thumbprint on the iPhone anymore. That'll be an identity. So it'll be a convenience to you, right? But the problem with that is with the new 5G, it's not so much the increased frequencies, although that may be a problem, but the tracking. Using the smaller wavelengths, these flat panel antennas, they can track a lot more people. There's a lot more bandwidth there to track. And so your phone talks to the cell tower, and then so you can triangulate off the cell tower. And then also you have a space capability with these. I might be moving my hands too much, Andy. I'm sorry.
No, we lost you there for like 2 seconds. You said you might lose space capabilities. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me okay, George?
Hey, I think we're back.
Yeah. We lost you there for a second. You said you might lose space capabilities.
Oh, I was just saying that space also, once I have a whole bunch of Internet of Things around you, I can start, you know, looking at from space as well.
Yeah.
So those are my quick thoughts. And every day we do more. I lead a crowdsourced research channel, and we have all these people. I basically do a summary every day of all the research from the night before. And that's how our channel works. For people who don't know me, I started it 4 years ago almost now, and that's our channel. We We have about 100,000 subscribers.
That's quite a lot of growth in that time there, George. And that's something I'm pretty proud of you for. That's it's
Slowing
great.
down.
Can you hear me? Okay, George.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. Do you fear for your life?
No. I had somebody just down the river here threaten to Jonestown my family, and what was the other one? Oh, Waco, my family. It was a pretty serious threat because he's from a military background. And I just
that's a
say,
crime.
yeah, it is. And I know his name and everything, but I just say, get in line. Get in line. This is too important. It's the whole world. So, hey, Andy, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You said you were from Wisconsin, and I don't know enough about you. And where were you born, and where did you grow up, and all that?
Oh wow. I'm from Milwaukee originally, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I think it's perhaps the most racially segregated city in the United States. There is a decent amount of racial tension in rural areas, which is why I like to ask other people of ethnic minorities about that. But I moved from there when I was about 8, because my father got a better job, and I was in Western Wisconsin until I was like 17. So went to Guam, actually, the island of Guam, because my mother works for the government. I was there, finished out high school, came back for college, and then after college, I actually just traveled until now. Yeah, and I actually just got here in the Pacific Northwest. Was about to start work, and this pandemic started. So that's the long and short of me, I guess. I don't know how much people wanna hear about that. I think they're more interested in you, George.
Well, I just wondered what college you went to.
Yeah, it was the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Oh, great! So you had the red square there too, right? Like UW. Madison always had the worst reputation.
Yeah, where did you go, George? Did you?
I went to Miami of Ohio, right here. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, right over here. Yeah.
Okay, nice.
So more Midwest, but so are you in Portland now or Seattle?
I'm actually in Eugene now, so another college town. But I'm leaving pretty soon here. But yeah, Red Square in Madison. That's kind of funny. You know, it's funny you say that, George, because I was never really into politics until my senior year of college. Really, basically the 2016 election, and I just couldn't ignore it at that point. And it's kind of funny that I did that living in Madison, because it's such a politically charged environment almost all the time, especially downtown. You know, it's such a liberal campus, similar to Portland, actually. But you're still in Oregon in the school year, or?
Oh no, I'm out in Maryland now. I'm in
Yeah.
this diplomatic back channel, but I have kids on the West Coast, and most of the last 20 years where I raised them was in Oregon. It was in Portland. So and then both of my kids went to U of O, so they had some good years there with football and all that. So that school is just so incredible with all the athletics now with Phil Knight. So you went at a pretty magical time for all that. Well, I just wonder. There's a guy who does a kind of a book publisher for the kind of alternative media, and it's called Trine Day Publishing. I don't know if you ever.
I have not heard of it.
You may be very interested in interviewing him in Eugene. He lives in Eugene, and check out his publishing. He's got a warehouse there, and it's really a labor of love. He loses money doing it, but he publishes all these authors that otherwise couldn't get published. And his name's Chris Milligan, Milligan. But we've kind of lately been interviewing these authors, and most of it's the conspiracy shade toward conspiracy, but
that's the hot topic right now.
Yeah, well, now this is conspiracy theorist dream days, right? Everything's happening. We told you, we told you so. It's
I
not a
didn't. You
conspiracy.
did, George. But
Yeah, it's not a theory anymore, is it? So everyone's seeing the Big Brother happening right before their eyes,
yeah,
one day to the next.
yeah, and
So
I'll definitely hit him up, George. Definitely, I will, and I appreciate that. Yeah, but we have been interviewing authors recently on my channel, both in the conspiratorial realm and outside as well. So I do appreciate that reference there, George. It's much appreciated.
yeah, I'll teach you this. The secret is buy their book on Kindle before you interview them, and then pick out 10 things, 10 proper nouns that the book is about, and then just use the Kindle to skip to that name and do all that name straight through the book, and then do it for each of the 10 names. You have a lot to talk about if you just do that.
Wow,
So that's a
I
way of cheating.
gotta try that heuristic out next time.
Yeah, well, it saves you from having to read the whole book, because most author interviews, it's the first chapter and the last chapter, because that's the two chapters people read. So anyway,
Well, I appreciate that advice there, George. But before you go on, I wanted to ask you: did you used to work for Rudy Giuliani?
informally, there was he used to have in 2002 and 2003, he used to have a crime center on top of in Times Square. So it was a command center. It was kind of a showroom. So this was the 9/11 showroom, if you will, and it wasn't geared toward. I mean, you could hire Giuliani and Associates um, to manage your Super Bowl or something like that. This would be like an event that he would, you could put in this showroom, but also it was for companies, large companies that also could put this in to manage their, I don't know, nuclear plant or whatever critical infrastructure. So so they were a customer of mine, and they one thing led to another, and they like there was a couple of NYPD, and NYPD had an intelligence unit, and they like to reach out to people that walk a lot, and just walk a lot, and be eyes and ears. And so I was never a paid informant or anything like that, but it they were trying to develop and market a a system, a web-based system where people could log in and all that. And so I was potentially going to go to work for them, selling this system, but I went away from it. I stayed with the company I was going with, so I was moonlighting a little bit.
Gotcha.
But that's how I learned what he was doing. And Rudy is a lot sharper than he he's got to be working for somebody, because he's a lot sharper than with all the. He would never, for instance, call two Ukrainian guys who have been lifetime criminals for 20 years and set up a meeting with the new president of Ukraine, with Zelensky, working through two criminals. That would never happen unless you're trying to set Trump up. So I don't trust Rudy anymore after that. After the whole thing happened with those two Ukrainian informants, I was like, oh God, there goes Rudy.
Is that related to the Biden phone
Yeah.
call scandal? Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember who. I can't remember the one guy is OKNY Ansky. That's how you spell his name. And then the other two guys, Parnas and Fruman, Lev Parnas and Fruman. Those three are all informants. Have been for 20 years. The only guy who didn't get citizenship was the Russian guy that they were using. But they're weapons brokers. And why does Rudy need to meet? Why does Rudy need to go through weapons brokers to get a meeting with Zelensky? Trump could just pick up the phone. So it was the same
Yeah.
dark weapons network that was messing around the 2016 campaign. So
Yeah, that's a good point to make with regards to that. And I actually don't know nearly as much as you do, George, about that. But I wanted to ask you too about books, because I love asking people about their reading. Do you have books that you go to, or some top favorites that you have that you like to revisit?
Yeah, I mean, the best book I ever read, well, other than the classics, right? I mean, but Devil's Chessboard by David Talbot. If you
Okay,
want
I've
to
never
get,
heard of it.
oh yeah, if you want one book that will open your eyes, there's a lot of great books. I mean, you know, Brothers by Stephen Kinzer, Secret Team by Fletcher Prouty is one I've come to know. There's a book about Fauci,
Oh
uh,
wow.
written by a guy from Newsweek, saying how he totally did inside uh, inside pay to play with all the AIDS drugs and milked AIDS for 30 years, still milking AIDS. Called by Bruce Nussbaum, called Good Intentions, which I just recently bought. Poisoner in Chief is a new book out by Stephen Kinzer. I think is very good. Um, there's uh, there's a relatively Trine Day author. I can't remember what his first name is, but because I always call him Dr. Hamamoto, but he wrote Servitors of Empire. That's another great book.
Dr. Hamamoto. Is
Dr.
that?
Hamamoto, he's a PhD in social media.
Oh wow.
And he
I didn't
taught
know
at,
that was a thing.
yeah, he taught at Cal, and he used to get 300 students, you know, like you, who could go out and party on Thursday night, that they would go in this gigantic lecture hall to go hear his lectures, because he did all this, like popular culture, analyze popular culture for its propaganda value. So,
Is that a reference to Yamamoto?
no, Hamamoto is his real name,
Oh wow. Okay.
but he does analyze all the K-pop and all the trance music and EDM and all that stuff you kids listen to that I don't know what it is.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't know that it was possible to get a PhD in social media. But as far as books, what about some non-political ones? Maybe some philosophy. Well, I guess you can see philosophy as political, but yeah, like maybe self-improvement, anything in that realm.
Well, I was on a big self-improvement kick when I was like 13 or 14 years old. So I read like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, and How to Speed Read. I was big into speed reading because I don't know why, I just like that. And I was big into chess, so I read a lot of chess books, Bobby Fischer and all this. But I think, you know, I was an English minor, so I got into a lot of the classics. And there's some good stuff there. Uh, you know, you can refer to it over and over again. That's the nice part about the classics. And you could, like Shakespeare, for instance, everything that's happened to Trump, there's like 12 Shakespeare plays. You know, you got 12 plays. You got Hillary trying to get the spot out of her hands like Lady Macbeth. You know, you've got the people trying to stab Trump in the back every time, like Julius Caesar. So it really is. I mean, I sometimes see the world in terms of Shakespeare. And then you go, hey, the world really can be that treacherous, you know? So,
Yeah, that's a lot of wisdom in the classics, and I need to read more Shakespeare. I've only read, I think, two of his in their entirety, and I actually did a play my senior year of college. I acted in Twelfth Night, so
oh,
I had
wow.
to read that one over and over.
Which character were you?
Sebastian.
Is he the, the young guy?
Yeah, he is one of the twins, I believe, or the
One of the
siblings.
twins.
So Viola and Sebastian, and they get confused because they look very similar.
But one's a girl and one's a boy, right?
Correct. Yeah, fraternal.
Yeah,
twins.
yeah. And they switch them around to do the
Yeah,
switches. Yeah.
yeah, you
Yeah.
got it. Yeah.
I remember 12th Night. Yeah. So that's fun. You know, I always, if you don't have time for Shakespeare, and most people don't, and they get bogged down, just go to the flourishes, you know, the speeches, and just
Mm.
fast forward to the flourishes. Like you can get Kenneth Branagh, and it'll basically, you know,
I actually
Henry.
watched his performance to study when I was studying Twelfth Night.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah. Did he play Sebastian?
no, what did he play? He was in it, but he didn't play Sebastian. I can't remember what character he played. But yeah,
Yeah,
he was in one of the productions I watched.
yeah. Well, you know, if you go to the Half Lure speech, you know, that he makes you know, and then We Happy Few speech, you pretty much have Henry V. You know, I mean, those are the two big things. One is there, you know, we're gonna lose or win here, and then, into the breach, and then okay, we win after Agincourt, and I'm going to make you all knights, and you're all going to be remembered for 1,000 years, and that's kind of the story. That tells you how England got to be where England is.
Yeah, his
And
understanding of human nature was profound. Is really deep, and he had this ability, and I can't remember the name of the author, but some author described it as a genius ability to hold two kind of opposing thoughts in his head at the same time. And that's why he was so good at writing out the nuances of human nature in his plays.
They used to call that counterpoise. Counterpoise. You could hold things in counterpoise.
Counterpoise.
And that allowed you to see things from both sides of a villain or good guy simultaneously. Yeah. And I very much agree with that. That's a very insightful into what's happening right now. You got Peter Strzok on one side with his gang, and Trump kind of completely surrounded in the castle, kind of like Hamlet, and not knowing where to turn or who's going to knife him next.
Yeah, right.
And he's just wandering around the White House wondering if he can eat a donut. So it really is kind of, I do see all these events as a play sometimes.
What are your thoughts? Because I'm sure if I would have asked you this at the beginning of the pandemic, it would have been different. What are your thoughts on Fauci and Trump, the leaders in general? If you want to name them, you can too, but just our leaders.
Well, Fauci has got this bad track record of taking patents in the stuff that ends up being the vaccine. I can almost predict where things are going to go by looking ahead of his patents. And the same thing was true for AIDS in this book, Good Intentions by Bruce Nussbaum. I don't think he won a Pulitzer, but he was a very well-renowned Newsweek writer. And he said, hey, he got the patent for interleukin-2. He basically shepherded it until he could sell it off with some other interests, obviously, to Wellcome Trust, which became AZT, which was not a very good solution in by itself. It wasn't until they developed the cocktail. And I did a lot of social media. The Webb was, I was the guy trying to use, I was at Sun Microsystems, and I was selling internet systems, getting companies started and schools started on internet systems. And so I was trying to get these professors to socialize this research on the web. So I was very involved in this whole social media of AIDS, of HIV research. And he secreted it. He didn't see patients. He had his favorites that were going to win. It's sort of like being on a baseball or basketball team, and there's the coach's kid, and the coach's kid's going to be a starter, and that if you're better, but you have to be the same position, you're not going to play. And that's how I see Fauci and Redfield, the guy at the CDC. He did the precursor protein. The precursor protein to glycoprotein 120 is GP160. And back in the early days of the AIDS virus, he was doing secret private trials behind the back of the FDA for Fauci, and Birx was his assistant. So you've got the three conspirators up there every day with Trump. And I just don't think Trump knows this history. Otherwise, he would change these people out. I think Trump is a phenomenon because people wanted a wrecking ball in Washington, and they knew there was nothing left to lose. There was like, I don't care if he knocks shit over. I want shit to get knocked over. Washington's so corrupt. And after living here for 3 years and seeing it, it's way more corrupt than you can even imagine. So I think that's the Trump phenomenon. But I don't think Trump realized how good they were at completely surrounding you and cutting you off. That Hamlet thing again, where you're alone in the castle,
Yeah, that's a good point, George, and it's really interesting that you describe it like that, because I think it's just a good analogy to think about it like that, and like a wrecking ball, because like I said before, I was not I'm gonna mute you a sec because there's a little feedback going on. There was like I said, in college 2016, I got to the point where I couldn't ignore the political situation anymore. And I voted for Hillary, but I now regret doing that. And I realize now the boon that Trump is, in the sense that he just upsets the status quo, you know?
Yeah. Sorry, we have these thing called ospreys. They're about 3/4 the size of eagles. So they're building their nests here. So that's the background noise.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually know what ospreys are. I've never seen one alive. I've seen one dead though, which is kind of sad. But
Oh, well, they're not there right now. But
okay,
anyway,
if
I saw
they
the
show up,
eagle.
they can make a cameo. But yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
saw the. Yeah, they will. They fly behind me all the time. I saw the eagle behind you, so that's why it reminded me.
yeah. My
Um,
green screen, I got the red, white, and blue going with the eagle. So
yeah. So I think you're in a really great position that you've started a. Jason Burmis.
I do not. Who is Jason Burmis, George?
He's a young guy also on Infowars. He may be a little bit older than you are, but I like to see most. I don't want to say kids your age because you're obviously a man and an adult, but
Thanks, George.
like I have a son older than you, so but but they're doing like gaming. They've got the whole video thing figured out and all that, but it's for gaming. It's not for anything like social concern.
Wait,
So
this is the Infowars guy you're talking about?
yeah, well, he's another guy who's doing politics and so forth and news. You're a little more general. He's straight on news all the way.
Mm.
But I like him a lot. But like I said, you're still a little bit more general. But as your
Yeah,
channel
I prefer that
matures,
though. But
yeah, as your channel matures, you'll find your thing, your
yeah,
niche,
for sure.
and it's usually I think like almost a perfect mirror of you as a person and how you grew up and the people you met and what you decided to study. Like I don't know what you decided to study in college.
Communication arts. I interned at the radio station there.
Oh wow, yeah. See, I have a face for radio. You don't. You have a face for YouTube. So
A
there
face
you
for radio.
go. Yeah, yeah.
I like that. A face for
Andy
radio.
Adds. Uh, my daughter asked me, "You're going to be on Andy Adds show, really?" Like,
Does she know who I am? Or
yeah. She does.
oh
Yeah.
wow.
She's out there. I won't say exactly where, but
Oh no, I won't track her down, George. Don't worry.
oh no, I'm not that. I'm not worried about you. Believe me.
Oh no, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
It's the internet. It's the
yeah.
internet.
Especially
Um,
with your name, and I wanted to bring this up too. You probably saw this, George, because your army keeps you well informed and up to date. But this ABC Eyewitness News story that came out not even a couple days ago. Let me just pull it up on screen here. Um, and our own George Webb, who we're chatting with today, folks, is on this website, Eyewitness News ABC 7. What's going on here, George?
well, this goes back 3 years, and so this CNN reporter is kind of stalking me, and his name's Donnie O'Sullivan, and he's kind of John Brennan's errand boy, if you will, and they send him out to when they think they have something on you, like you reported something incorrect, they'll go do a hit piece. He did a hit piece on me 3 years ago, and now another hit piece just recently.
This same author?
Same guy. Yeah. Well, this is a syndicated story. So what happens a lot is CNN, CIA News Network will, and I'm not saying everybody at CNN, CIA, but there are operatives that will write a story that they, there are operatives. And then what happens is the Washington Fox 5 affiliate will get a story handed to them and they'll pick it up and put it on the wire. Okay. And then you basically, as a news editor all across the country, could pick it up as a local affiliate and just drop the story straight into your template. And then it's like you don't have to work on news. You can go back to selling advertising. for clicks on your website. And the reason why this was so hot was there was a contingent of 168 or maybe 172 athletes, depending on who you talk to, that went in October to Wuhan. And they went to the games and from the United States. And the United States team performed very poorly. They finished 40th out of, I don't know, 50 teams. Maybe it was more than that. Maybe it was 70 teams. But it was like unbelievable that the United States wouldn't be in the top 5. They got 3 silvers and 5 bronze, no golds. You know, that's unheard of for the United States. You know, we got beat by Iran and Ukraine and all these countries. A lot of people came back with reports that the team got sick, and a large percentage of the team had coronavirus. And then the Chinese foreign minister, his spokesman, not the Chinese foreign minister, but the spokesman said that they actually believe that the American team at these World Military Games that's run by NATO, the World Military Games was in late October in 2019. This foreign minister's spokesman said that the Americans brought it here. Okay. So this isn't something that I came up with, the story I came up with. This is the Chinese foreign minister. Now, normally in Washington, D.C., you never get a quote like that. You never get an official state news or state somebody from the State Department, let's say Mike Pompeo, to come over with their State Department spokesman and endorse and say this, that let's turn around, that the Chinese team came over and did this. You can imagine that would be big news on the nightly news, right?
Yeah.
That, oh, you know, Mike Pompeo thinks the Chinese team infected us. Well, all I did was I looked at the people on the team, and I had some contacts at Fort Belvoir. I knew that this person worked at the Fort Belvoir hospital, and I knew that there was testing of the athletes at Fort Belvoir hospital. And I also had 2 other previous contacts who were doctors. One was a doctor, well, both were doctors, but in slightly different parts of Fort Belvoir, telling me that there was testing, illegal, private type testing, the same kind of testing that this Fauci is doing over at Fort Detrick, which is another fort here in Maryland, 30 years ago. So I thought, okay, let's research this. And this is where you get into people dropping you breadcrumbs, but I was given the message that, hey, she's one of them. That she's one of the folks that tested. And I didn't necessarily, we had right next to where I'm sitting, we had a group of 10 people come in to what we had. It was kind of a newsroom. This is before coronavirus. It was after coronavirus broke, but it wasn't where we all had to shelter in place. And we're working on whiteboards. And you know how you have ideas and so forth, so you write stuff up on a whiteboard, right? So I wrote her name up on a whiteboard. I wrote a couple of other names up on a whiteboard. So it was a working session. Okay. Well, what the CNN reporter did was he took the whiteboard sessions where we were spitballing and said that was my reporting. Right. Right. And then
how did he get a hold of that, George?
Because there were YouTube videos.
Oh, okay.
YouTube videos. Right. And I won't say who came and went to the session, but I was given positive feedback that person did indeed test. Now, what I said was either for the antibody, or meaning they were vaccinated before they went to the games, or they had it and got better, but they still had the antibody. Well, he just basically made it into George Webb is leading a whole bunch of neo-Nazis, and they're marching to this woman's home, and they're, somehow don't like her and want to hold her responsible for the whole world collapsing.
Yeah,
Um,
it was kind of weird how they said it was getting out of hand, but they didn't say exactly what. But so this seems to be a personal vendetta that this particular reporter has against you. Would you say that's accurate, George?
I don't think it's a personal vendetta. I think he's more the errand boy who'll do anything John Brennan asks him to do, or John Brennan's flunky. He was recruited in Ireland at this Queen's University, which is one of these places that Brennan recruits. And a lot of times journalists are very important to drop stories to hem in your opponent. You saw Peter Strzok use journalists all the time. Comey using journalists all the time. A whole bunch of people on Capitol Hill. This Wolf guy who was in the Senate leaking out Carter Page's stuff because it creates a havoc. It creates crisis for your opponent. Right.
Yeah.
So that's Donnie. If you start getting close on a story, you're going to get Donnie O'Sullivan. And a lot of people said, don't do the Donnie O'Sullivan story. He's going to smear you. I said, that's fine. Let him have the initial wave of smear and have all these people. You wouldn't believe how many death threats I got. I stopped counting after 50.
Oh, wow.
But so I took down my Twitter and I deactivated it for a while. And I'm just putting up all the evidence. I'm just reminding everybody of all the evidence. But we had looked up, and she did turn out to be a NATO courier. And not only a NATO courier, but a NATO courier for the Supreme Allied Commander. Okay. Now, if you didn't know that these NATO couriers, a lot of the times there's a move these blood pathogens around to these different laboratories, you wouldn't put the two together. But she was not American. She was Dutch. She was being presented as American. And so I just thought there was something rotten in Denmark, so to speak, with another Hamlet allusion. So that's how it happens. You know, you can go 3 years, but you make that one mistake. Again, I might have been given bad information too, just like 3 years ago, to put my foot in the trap. But that's how the game works. That's how it works. It's all about discrediting you so that CNN is the trusted source of news, you know.
So they just want to wait for you to make one mistake and then pounce.
But it's a breadcrumb. It's the breadcrumb inside the little, you know, with the rope. It's or it's the whatever. It's the bait inside the trap, right? So baiting me. I was already saying she was a courier, a NATO courier for the Supreme Allied Commander. This guy named Stavridis. And there was another guy named James Jones. James Jones had used a botnet tool called ShadowNet in the 2016 election. He didn't have a good record. Stavridis was a key part of using Malta as a dark weapons launching point in the takedown of Libya, and also Syria. So they didn't have good histories. And throughout my whole 3 years, we've been following these BlackBerries that were configured by NATO that our NSA can't see what they're talking about. Our own allies, but we can't see what they're talking about because they're using this private encryption.
Is that what you mean by BlackBerries, like unknown messages?
Yeah. They're dark messages, and
Okay.
that's the way you do these deals, right? You know, it's like criminals, a drug deal, right? You want the encrypted BlackBerry or the encrypted phone. That's the same thing you would use for bioweapons dealing or chemical weapons or nuclear weapons or nuclear centrifuges. And it was just a running thing with these NATO BlackBerries with me for 7 or 8 years. And so when I saw NATO courier, hey, NATO couriers carry NATO BlackBerries. When I saw it was Stavridis and Jones again, I said, oh my God, this is Libya all over again. It just was too perfect. So, but I went for that last little bit of bait that she was patient zero. And that was the mistake. I did make a mistake there.
Well, that's awesome that you can admit that, George, because I do think that is that ability or skill is in short supply nowadays, and certainly in this pandemic. But I'm curious, George, are you now a full-time reporter, or how would you describe in addition to answering that question, how would you describe what you do?
Yeah, I'm full time. I assume you have a Patreon. I hope you do.
I actually don't. I was in the process of making it like 2 days ago, and then I just stopped. So I should get on that though, shouldn't I, George?
Yeah, you definitely should, because you could then do this full time. And the thing is, if you don't do it, CNN wins. You know,
That's
and
true.
CNN is fake news. You know, it's interesting that CNN came after me. I'll get back to the question in a second, but
Yeah, yeah.
CNN comes after me, but they're the ones. Donnie on his own bio says he is the killer or the hunter of Russia trolls, right? He's the hunter of Russia trolls, and he's one of the key attack dogs for going after people on the web saying they're Russian trolls. You know, these housewives from, you know, I'm trying to think of Racine. You know, I'm trying to pick someplace close to you. You know, they're sorting recipes, but then they're inflamed about, you know, Peter Strzok, you know, trying to take out the president. And then Donnie's the guy who will go on and say the person's a Russian troll. The kid who did, remember the 14-year-old that did the CNN meme where Trump takes the CNN guy and throws him out of the wrestling ring?
Oh yeah, I did see that. Yeah,
Yeah, and crushes CNN's skull on a chair or
it's
something.
like a WWE spoof, right?
Yeah, it was a WWE spin. Donnie went after the 14-year-old. Donnie went after the 14-year-old that created that spoof. Like, come on. It's funny. It's funny. CNN got their skull smashed
Yeah,
open.
I
It's
can see
funny.
a large portion of middle schoolers who would, do that in their free time with their friends or whatever,
Yeah, it was not meant to incite violence. Donnie came out and said, oh, it was a hate speech, and it was meant to incite all 14-year-olds. You know, it's like, are you really kidding me? Have you seen Halo lately? I mean,
Yeah, right. Well, I want to be respectful of your time, George, and I do have another interview
oh,
coming up shortly here as well. But I just want to thank you, George, for speaking with me because I know you. Well, was it because of that article that you kind of just stepped back a little bit, or just?
well, what I'm doing is crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's. So I'm going back over all the information I have and then presenting it, representing it but with annotation so people know where every source of information is. Because when something like this happens, the first knee jerk is, oh, well, I can't trust him anymore. Hey, there was one little thing I did, but I'm 99% of the reporting is rock solid. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Awesome. So everyone who wants to check out George's channel and his links, I will put them in the description box below. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope we can speak again in
Yep.
the future, George. I would love
Yeah. Get that Patreon going. All right.
Will
Thank you
do,
very
sir.
much, Andy.
Cheers. Have a good night, everyone. And be on the lookout for my interview with John Wedger. It's coming up shortly, as well as someone else from CNN later today. Cheers.